once you start, then you have to do the Facebook thing.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Uh, Good to see everybody on this Sunday evening, and welcome to our conversation tonight. Tonight, I get the pleasure of speaking with Vivek. Vivek and I had the opportunity to do about 3 months of coaching, where we actually, basically did the coaching sessions and we recorded them and then we posted them online for people to view. So it was quite a different experience, both for me and I'm sure, for Vivek as well. But I'm excited tonight because if anybody's been following along, they're going to get to sort of be in this conversation with us as we look at like, hey, what was this experience like for Vivek and anything that he wants to share. So thanks for joining us, Vivek.
Yeah, of course.
Hmm. I'm just going to check this. Yeah, it is locked on my profile. So just give me one sec. Okay. Of course, it goes slow. There we go. Okay, we're good. So, the first place that I really want to jump into for our conversation is, um, what made you sign up for this experience? This experience of basically allowing yourself to be seen publicly in a coaching conversation over a 3 month period of time. Like, what both drew you to the experience? Well, let's just start there. Like, what drew you to the experience in the first place?
What drew me to the experience? So you and I we had some conversations before, right? And we were talking about what potentially I could get out of a coaching arrangement with between you and I. And then we had sort of paused, and I was looking at my expenses, and I figured that, hey, this is not going to work out. But then you posted this offer about, uh, you know, if you agree to be recorded, you can have this experience. So I applied, and I think one thing, like, I didn't think of it at that time, but looking back, what I found is that the piece about recording the conversations and having it available for others to see later on for however long, in in some sense, I'm thinking that it's going to allow people to relate to what's going on in their life and see that, hey, I'm not the only one who goes through these ups and downs. There are other people like me who have similar challenges, and there's a place for coaching to help me get past them. So I think that's pretty exciting for me, is
Hmm.
to be in service of people in that way, right? I mean, so that was another, like, I didn't think of it at the time when I applied and when we started, but now that's the thought that is coming up for me, is that yeah.
Yeah. Well, um, it is really interesting because my experience of this world of coaching is like, okay, there's a lot of talk out in the world of like, oh, how amazing coaching is and like what can be created from it. But from my experience of it, like a lot of it happens behind sort of closed doors.
Mm.
So there's actually like a statement which would be like, I'm gonna kind of butcher it right now, but the idea is there is like, instead of telling people about how good it is, actually giving people the experience of
Experience.
it.
Yes.
And that's and I'm so thankful that you were willing to be in partnership for that, because I do think that there's a real opportunity to really show the power of this work and show what can happen in this container, because there's a lot of misconceptions about coaching, I would say, out in the world as well, and kind of rightfully so, given like um, it's kind of like in a sense like a bit of a wild west in a way, where like
Yes.
anybody can kind of label themselves a coach out in the world right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that what's so exciting about being able to like share this work publicly is like it shows that like, oh, there's actually like there's a process to this, there's an
Mm.
expertise to this, and there's a real partnership to this that really does separate from, say, therapy or counseling, or because all of these modalities are valuable. And it's a lot of me talking about it, but like I really really, at the heart of it, I appreciate you like being like helping spearhead this as well, like spearhead what could be created here.
Yes. Yeah, I think the phrase that you were looking for is, which is what often I used to say to my son, is show me, don't tell me.
Yeah,
It's the same thing. Yes. Yeah, yeah,
totally,
yeah.
totally. It's funny. This is why I love these interviews. Um, Before we dive in further, is there anything that you want to share about yourself to the audience? Like, who are you? Where you are in the world? We probably actually didn't get to cover much of that in the coaching session. So, if there's anything that you would like to share, about yourself ahead of time, more than welcome to.
Okay, what do I want to say? So, by profession, I'm an engineer, and until recently, I was working for a large tech company. Then, in January, I got laid off. End of January, I got laid off. So, I'm looking for my next gig. And then, outside of work, I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, right now, at least. And outside of work, I'm very passionate about meditation and breath work and the transformation that those things can bring in people in society. So that's sort of, and what else? I'm very like curious about different things, in general. Like I was just talking about like how you are passionate about, or at least you have a goal about running a marathon this year, and that's your fitness goal. And I'm playing volleyball at a recreational league here, which I haven't played in a while. So yeah. Does that cover what you were intending me to cover, or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
okay?
there's no real like,
Okay.
real like push there, but
Okay.
yeah, just anything that you wanted to share, and I
Okay.
definitely, as we get to the end of the conversation, I would love if you shared more about the art of living with people,
Yes.
and that's actually a great segue to the next question of, one of the, I guess, almost like the curiosities that I have is like, okay, you've done a lot of powerful work coming
Mhm.
into this coaching experience. So where does like where does the coaching, like this coaching experience, fit in with the rest of the work you've done? Like, where do you see similarities? Where do you see differences? Yeah, like where, like what, I'm kind of being wordy about it, but like, where do you kind of just feel like, oh, this was an experience in its own?
Yes. So I think the most powerful pieces of the coaching experience, in my experience, were just being held. Right. I mean, like you created a safe container for me to show up as me and be totally vulnerable about, be totally open about what's going on within me, so that we can just look at it. So I can look at it from a place of, okay, I'm not caught up in it, I can look at it. Right? So
Mm,
that was the most valuable piece of the coaching. And from that, just looking is where insights came up, or like, oh, this is not working as well as I would like it to, so maybe there's an opportunity to shift it. So those kind of things came up in comparison to what I've done for, in terms of my own personal practices and things like that. So from the art of living, I have a very strong um, daily practice of meditation. And there is also, I mean, there are opportunities to sort of sit together in a group and dive into wisdom. And then the work of actually taking that wisdom and then looking at yourself is sort of your internal work, right?
mm,
And this is where the coaching sort of gave that container, that okay, there is this time that we sit together and we look at what comes up and see if those patterns are somewhere repeating in different parts of my life, and recognizing those, or and then recognizing that, hey, this pattern is showing up in multiple places, and is that serving me or not serving me, or right? So that's how I think those two went together in that sense.
yeah. So if I was to sort of like sum that up, like,
Yes.
so the work that you're doing is very powerful in the background that you've had. um, it sounds like there's a possibility that like sometimes in that container there's almost like deep insight, and sometimes the insight might not be tie to like action or like something
Hmm.
like that necessarily in that container. Like you're saying, like
Yeah.
it's sort of the onus is on you to take it and go work with it, which is still a very powerful way of doing things. But
Yes.
what it sounds like that was beneficial in the coaching was like, hey, we still get to have these discussions. We can make these connections to these other areas of life. And like generally there's some sort of practices or next steps to sort of integrate that work.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
You put it very well. So
Yeah,
yes.
for sure. No, that's great to hear. Um, yeah. So okay, and then the piece that I'm also curious about was, had you experienced coaching sessions prior to the work that we had done?
No. No. This is my first experience with coaching like this.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So, and the thing that I'll reflect to you is that like what I thought was so cool, probably even from our first or second conversation, and of course in those weeks of coaching was like you took to the experience very quickly.
Hmm.
There's I can share with you sort of some of the secrets, but like generally, the first 3 months of a coaching experience in this way is really like supporting somebody to get into the foundation of coaching. So like
Hmm.
supporting them to understand the flow of the conversation, putting in that coaching request, like just supporting an individual to get those foundational pieces in. And what
Hmm.
I found with you is like you rolled with that very quickly.
Hmm.
So what do you think of that? Like just hearing that reflected to you.
I think that speaks quite a bit to the power of the practices that I received from the Art of Living, is because
Hmm.
like even today I had this conversation earlier today with somebody that what these practices do is make us aware of what is happening, and I think that's where I see like the value of it. Like when I show up to some place, I bring with it's a little incorrect to say I bring with it. It comes along. That awareness comes along, and the awareness is because of the meditation practices. I think that's where I see this. What, like so that's what comes up when you share that. Oh, I showed up in a different way than you normally see clients show up.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it sounds like from the practices that you've taken on, like there's almost that um I would call it like an ability to see sort of outside of yourself,
Hmm.
outside of what's currently happening in front of you.
So.
Where what I would say I notice with like let's call it humanity is that most people get very sort of they get tunnel vision on the life that they have right in front of them.
Hmm.
What are the problems that are showing up in my life? What are the bills that need to be paid? And like that becomes sort of the central focus of life, that like nothing else can be seen outside of that, or at least very
Hmm.
little. I'm sort of going off on a bit on this, but like, and what I am experiencing from you is that like there is an ability to sort of kind of like you're speaking in the coaching container, right? Like there's an ability to step outside of like what's the current issue and gain elevation, and
Hmm.
that's kind of what it feels like you're speaking to, that you've gained from the art of living, that's really like allowed you to step into a container like this, or other containers, and really like show up in a powerful way.
Yes. Yes. I think that's you put it very well. Yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So now I guess it's funny. I was going to go to one place in terms of our conversations, but like, so having said all that, I'd be curious. Like, was there anything that you didn't get out of this experience, or you felt disappointed with, or just like, yeah, just felt like, oh, I wish that there was more of this in this coaching experience.
Hmm. That's hard to say. I think so. One thing that Okay, so what I gained a lot of is self-awareness, right? And the piece that I was like, oh, I wish this was also there, is something for let me see what am I how to put it. Okay, so I think this is the way to put it. If I were to go to a task like a volleyball coach, okay, and I train with them for 6 weeks or whatever, some amount of time, then right at the end of that, like if I go to a game, on week one versus go to a game on, whatever, 3 months later of coaching, the game would be improved and there are results to see. Okay, like
Hmm.
obvious results to see. In the coaching, in at least in my experience of coaching, there is for me, there wasn't really anything concrete to say, hey, this is what got created. The things that got created were more subtle and
Mm.
they were more about how I showed up in different areas of my life. Right? So that connection to how I was showing up because of the coaching, or the part that was sort of like took a little bit effort, is to relate how I'm showing up now versus how I was showing up before the coaching, and relate
Hmm.
it back to the coaching experience. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to sort of like summarize that, it would be like there was not a feel of like concrete results.
Yes.
So 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 things were created, but
Hmm.
it wasn't the things that you were like when we started on day one, when we had a discussion about like, hey, what do you want to create in this program? What
Yeah.
I'm what I'm assuming is that like the things that we sort of put down on paper were not created in that timeline. It was other things that were created
Correct.
outside of that.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Like I can't point to like, hey, I wrote this book because of this coaching, right? So there's nothing like
Right.
that. But and at the same time, how I show up on the volleyball court, how I show up in my relationships, how I'm dealing with this whole layoff and this thing has changed because of the coaching.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah.
Yeah, and like so one thing that I would speak to first would be like sometimes it's just a matter of time. It might
Yes.
have been like, hey, three
Exactly.
months, 3 months was just not,
Exactly.
we set the target,
Yeah.
and in that 3 month period, like unfortunately the target just wasn't, we didn't quite reach it. That's sort
Yeah.
of the
Correct.
simple way
Correct.
of it.
Correct.
And then the other piece of it is like, so a place even just to look is like, okay, so we had sort of some concrete targets or some things that you wanted to create. Well, is it actually untrue that we didn't create any like concrete things? Like if you
No, no,
actually
it's
look at
not.
those.
We did create a lot of things. Actually, that's true. There
Mhm.
are things that happened. You're right. There are things that I created. Like for example, the group class that I created as
Yeah.
part of it was a result of the uh, of our coaching conversations. So I take it back. It's not that I cannot point to things. There are things I can point to. Yes,
Yeah,
that's true.
and
Yeah, yeah.
and again, like this is not a like, oh, let's say the right things to like
No, no,
make me
no,
look good or
no,
that
no,
type
no.
of thing.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
but
Definitely
it,
not.
it, it's an interesting place to look because my experience has been oftentimes, um, I will set targets, and sometimes, oftentimes I will not hit those targets in the
Yes,
set
in that
timeline,
timeline. Yeah,
but there are many things that get created on along the way in
correct,
service of that.
correct,
And
correct.
still it's worth, so it's kind of like it's kind of an interesting thing because like on one hand it's like that might be a place to look in terms of like if going forward in the future you find like, oh, I set this target, I didn't hit the target, so like what does that mean,
Hmm.
right? And that might actually just might be worth looking at, like,
Yes,
well, like, is that like, yes, maybe you didn't hit the big target yet, but like what did you create so far?
yes,
Because I imagine that at times there can be that feeling of like it's kind of all or nothing. Either I hit the target or I don't, and then what's the impact of that?
So actually the thing I was thinking about. So yes, momentum got created, which will
Hmm.
lead to results in the time it will lead to. And I was thinking about the example that I was giving with the volleyball coach.
Hmm.
Even there, right? If you set the goal that I'm going to win this game, that's a like you may not, like you may lose,
Yeah.
but how you showed up to play and how like you dealt with you know maybe you could have gotten injured which you didn't because of it, like all those things are true for this experience as well, right? So
Hmm.
momentum got created, resilience got created, more playfulness and ease and joy got created as part of these coaching conversations, and that is creating momentum and setting the stage for whatever targets are set in the future. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a yeah.
And so and here's the spin that I'll put on this as well is like,
Yeah.
and there's still something to that, right? Because
Oh yes.
there
Yes.
is a feeling there of like, oh, like those 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 targets that I really wanted to hit, I didn't hit in this timeline. And
Mhm.
so the thing that I would, not necessarily a question to answer here, but it's like, what would have to be created within you to actually like create those things that you want? Like,
Mhm.
what shift would need to occur there
Yes.
going forward?
Yes.
Because here's the thing is that like this can work in both directions, right?
Mhm.
That yes, giving yourself credit for what is being created along the path. And there's something to be said about actually reaching those targets that you
Yes.
set.
Correct.
So both places that you're looking in are totally, totally valid.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else, like, anything else when you think of the experience that you didn't get or you wish that there was more of?
What I wish there was more of is that we could continue this like, arrangement going forward. I think I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I used to look forward to our sessions. And
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great thing,
yeah,
just that there's that desire there, and
yes.
the the conversation is always available. Um, so now if we shift a bit and look at like, yeah, so what did you actually create from this experience? Where do, like and I, actually a place that I'd be interested to touch on is like I imagine that you came in with a specific desire at the beginning of the experience,
Mhm.
and where did we end up? Like, did we end up in that place? Like, what do you notice?
So what I noticed, actually, there were a lot of different realizations. Like I remember we had this conversation about, we had this conversation where I connected how, being present is tied to rest and playfulness. And that was a very powerful connection that got formed for me. And I would say like that was one of the biggest lessons is that connection that I formed between, oh, yes, when I'm rested, when I'm playful, I show up, I'm more present, I'm not concerned about the outcome of, a particular conversation. I can be in service to the person who's in front of me. And so that was very powerful for me. That got like that, just forming that connection. Uh, with like what I had come in with was that okay, I wanted to create this result, but for me what was more important was that the process of creating that result was with ease and joy and um, I think there's one more word there which is missing right now. It's not coming to me right now, but that's what got created, like the process being easy in the mind and joyful. That's what got created. So
Hmm.
the pathway got created to accomplish whatever I want to accomplish with ease and joy. And that was one of the big things I was looking for. When I came into the coaching, like when we started it, I remember I was struggling with these like, oh, I want to accomplish this, I want to do this, I want to do that, but it was becoming like a big thing in my mind. And because this was running, the action was not present, right? And through our conversations, this thing sort of settled down. There was more
Mm.
ease, there was more joy, and the momentum to create and the action started to happen also. So that was a very powerful thing for me. Like,
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the breakthrough that you're speaking
yes,
about, right? That
yes,
ease and joy. And I will say to you that like that's been a breakthrough for me as well,
mm,
and others that I've been in conversation with. Ease, joy, play, um, the ability to bring that both in a service-based business and then as a way of being of life, like
yes,
it is such a powerful shift
yes,
because I even spoke about this last week, right? Like I have a tendency to be very serious. Well,
mm,
I don't take myself seriously, but like it's almost like the structure of life has been very work oriented,
mm,
or I show up very serious, and then like on like what ends up happening from that is that there's like a little bit of play and a little bit of joy. It's sort of like the afterthought of this stuff.
yeah,
So that's why it's so powerful you speaking to like what would a like having a life created from a place of ease, joy, restfulness, and then having that as the catalyst to be with others, it's
mm,
such a different way of being.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Actually,
awesome. Go ahead.
this also reminded me of how, like before we went live, I was sharing with you that, oh, I had this job interview last week, and then I had one the week before. And
Hmm.
if I look back at it, the one that went really well, which was last this past week, I showed up with that energy of,
Mm.
being relaxed and joyful, and being able to connect with the person on the other side. But the previous week was more like work oriented, right? It was like, oh, it's a test, and it's like, oh, I'll
Mm.
either pass or fail. And so that like what you just said about, oh, just operating from that space of, lightness, and that, like, you also asked that question in the Facebook group about what if you could trust spirit more, right? That's and this is connected to that also in some sense,
Yes.
right? So yeah, I don't know where I
Yeah.
was going with that, but that
No,
example
it's
came up.
it's
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's just it is that that's such a great example, right?
yeah,
Noticing how two different job interviews can go two totally different ways
different
just from
ways.
how where you're coming from, right? Are you
Yeah.
coming from ease, joy, playfulness, or are you coming from like seriousness, or you've got to get this right,
Yeah.
sort of that like rigidity? It's going to be two different conversations,
Yes.
and that's really what this work is about, is really opening it up so that we can be aware of where we're coming from. Really, it's funny we didn't talk about it, but where are we coming from, our essence, right?
Yes.
Can our
Yes.
essence be present with us, the majority of our time?
Time.
That's really
Yes.
where it shifts life.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as we start to wind down here, is there anything else that you haven't shared about the experience yet, or anything that's sort of left remaining for you?
I think the one thing that I want to say is there were times where, um, like, I can distinctly remember at least two or three times where you provided this safe space for me to just be with whatever was coming up, and to be in that kind of a safe space was something I had not experienced, often in the past. Like, I think it was maybe, yeah, it was very rare. And just that, uh, just that trust allowed for things to unfold. And that was, I think, like, to me, that was spirit showing up and guiding us, right? I mean, because of that container that you created, the safe space that you created. So that was very
Mm.
wonderful. That was very touching for me, and I'm grateful for that experience.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and thanks for speaking to it. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, there's absolutely credit I could take there, I guess, but I think that the it's so interesting because it's truly a partnership. right? Because I could create that space, and then the individual I'm with is very like pushing back, or like, you know, like distrusting the space, and that's going to have an impact on me, you know,
Mm,
as the individual on this side. And so really, like, yes, like, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because that is truly the space that I'm wanting to create. And like, that was us being in partnership and having that trust in each other as well. So I mean, as much, you know, yes, I'll take the acknowledgement and like right back at you with that, because there were things that happened in those conversations that they happened because the trust and the partnership was there fully between us, which I'm also extremely grateful for, to be in that experience with you. So thanks, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, Last place I want to touch on with you is I'd love to hear more about the art of living, and, you know, just whatever else that you're up to that you'd like to share, because I think you're up to some pretty impactful work.
yes. Okay. So, art of living. Where do I begin? Yeah, it's okay. So since we are in this community of, no more Mr. Nice Guy, right? Uh, I think most of us realize that the things that hold us back are emotions that come up, like negative emotions that come up, and we haven't learned how to handle them. Right? So whether it's anxiety, whether it's fear, whether it's, anger, regret, worry, whatever it is. And if you look at our education system, like neither at home nor at, a church or a temple are we taught how to handle these emotions. Like why do
Mm,
they arise? How to handle them? People have theories about why they arise, but anyways, right? And what is missing is some concrete tools and techniques that will allow us to, go past those emotions. Like we said, get in touch with the essence, the spirit in us, so that we can, like, so that we can be ourselves. Okay. And this is what the art of living provides, a very concrete set of tools and techniques based in the breath, which allow for us to really get in touch with who we are. Right? Uh, there have been tons of research studies on these techniques. So the technique is called Sudarshan Kriya, or sky breathing, and there
mhm,
have been tons and tons of research on, what it does for people. Uh, Actually, I was today reading. Oh, this book is right here. I was reading this book, Presence, by Amy Curry. I don't know if you haven't read it. It's a really powerful book. Even in this book, there's a whole section on Sudarshan Kriya, because
mm,
what they were saying is that people who have post-traumatic stress, it's a very hard thing to get past. Like not many things work on it. And what the book was sharing was some research on the sky breathing, the Sudarshan Kriya breathing, among veterans, where the post-traumatic stress is really high. And what they found is that within a span of a week, like 1 week intervention, they saw the markers of post traumatic stress go down significantly. Okay, which is not surprising, right? I mean,
mhm,
many interventions do that. The surprising bit is that those markers stay down a month later and a
mhm.
year later. So, which seems to suggest that these changes are permanent. Right? So, the techniques are very powerful, and anybody can learn these techniques if you go to artofliving.org. This is a non-profit that is present in over 150 countries across the world. So, wherever in the world you are, you can find a local teacher who can teach you these techniques. And then to relate it to what I want to do here in the place that I live in, is that these techniques are sort of packaged in different formats for different groups. So there's a
Mhm,
program that is specifically for veterans. There's a program that is specifically for people in the prison system, right? I mean, whether it's the incarcerated individuals or individuals coming out of the system, or the staff, right? I mean, staff is also very stressed. There's another program that is geared specifically towards doctors and nurses and healthcare providers. And so my vision is to actually bring all of these programs to the place where I am here, so
right.
that so that we can approach different sections of the society in a way, in a cohesive way, so that in general, like the stress level in the city goes down, and we can
Hmm.
create a place which thrives on forward motion and progress rather than, like, right now Albuquerque is known for crime and these like it's not, when somebody says Albuquerque, people think of Breaking Bad, right? I mean, that's the so my intention is to change that, is
Right.
to, so that's the vision that I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if somebody was not in Albuquerque, like I know you're speaking to, like, oh, like there could be a practitioner, like there's likely a practitioner in your city or that type of thing.
Mhm.
Still curious, like, do you offer any of this work online? Do you do any
Yes.
workshops or anything that people could get information on?
Yes. Yeah. Again, go to artofliving.org, www.artofliving.org, and there are workshops that are online as well. So you can join
Hmm.
an online workshop. It takes about whatever 3 days, about 10 hours to learn these
Okay.
techniques. Once you've learned them, then you just practice. You can,
Mm,
like, you can practice them on your own. You can also get connected with your local group. You can join an online group. So all of those options are available. Yes.
awesome. So, and we'll definitely, yeah, go ahead, Vivek.
I was going to add one more thing. So,
Yeah.
something very interesting is happening later this year. So, one of the things that Art of Living has done, 3 times in the past, is brought together large number of people
Mm-hmm.
um, in in celebration. So, if you think about, if you look at society, how we are also divided these days, right, based on economics, based on our political views, and all these different things. And if you think about the the two things that bring people together, right? So one is sports, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the other is culture.
Mm.
So sports, we had the World Cup soccer just not too
Yep.
long ago, right? So this is our Olympics, right? So this
Mm-hmm.
is like a cultural Olympics. So at the end of September, so September 29th, 30th, and October 1st, at Washington D.C., at the mall in Washington D.C., the world will come together for the World Culture Festival.
Mm.
And whoever is listening, I invite you to come. It's free to attend. You just have to come and be part of this. And if you go to worldculturefest.org, you can see the pictures and videos from the past 3 events, and they're amazing. I've been to all three, so and I'm hoping to be on this
Mm-hmm.
one as well. It's an experience of a lifetime. It's
That's
really an
awesome.
experience of a lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we'll
Yes.
make sure to provide links to both the Art of Living and the World Cultural Festival. The one
Yes.
thing that I wanted to check in, so the World Cultural Festival, if somebody can't go to Washington, D.C., can they get a virtual ticket? I
I
can't remember if that was on the website or not.
It's not on the website, but I think eventually they will do it.
Okay.
It's not there on the website yet. So
Yeah, yeah. That
yeah,
sounds good. Yeah,
yes,
and so, a couple things I would put in is like one, like please feel free to connect. Well, actually, Vivek, is it okay if people connect with you
yes,
if they
yes,
have questions
absolutely,
about this work before I
absolutely,
offer it? And then
absolutely.
same thing with this World Cultural event. Please, if you have questions or if you're interested, please feel free to put them in this feed, and we'll make sure that this information gets to Vivek so he can help
Yes,
support in that way.
yeah,
Well, that's excellent to hear. The one thing that I'll put in as well is that so if you haven't had a chance, I called this series of coaching with Vivek, the magic of coaching. It's up on YouTube. It's on a playlist where you can actually watch all the coaching calls one by one. I will put a link in the chat, or sorry, in the comments for that as well, if you want to go back and watch those, or catch any that you missed. Well, this is awesome.
yes,
Thanks so much for being willing to jump on tonight. Last thing I would like to do is I'd like to give you some acknowledgement. Would you be open to acknowledgement?
yes,
Yeah, thank you. I kind of cheated just a little bit because I was thinking about you today when I was just up on the ski hill. The first place I really want to acknowledge you is for the peace that you bring. I think that as I was sitting up on the ski hill today, I was like, one of the really powerful things that you brought to this experience was like, even in the challenging moments or the moments of frustration or whatever was happening, there was a groundedness there about you, a groundedness that it's like you knew that you would figure it out. You knew that
mhm,
you would make a path forward. And it was such a it was so powerful to witness that from you in this experience, because I knew on my side that like we were pushing into new territory in many of our conversations, and yet you brought that peace, you brought that groundedness, that sort of acceptance of like, yeah, like here I am, and like I'm gonna be all right. Like I'm gonna move through this, and something new will be created. So thank you for really modeling that energy throughout that experience. Um, what else can I say? I really want to acknowledge you for the service that you do bring to the world. You know, a lot of our conversations were around the commitment to, you know, yes, your business, but also or I say your business, the nonprofit, but really, you know, in life. And what I thought was so powerful about the commitment is like, if you really think about it, that was a commitment to be of service to others, of creating things for others, for creating workshops for others, or, you know, creating habits that support you, but ultimately support you to get to a rested, peaceful place so you can support others. So thank you for continuing to be that light and that generosity for the world. I mean, as you're speaking to it in this conversation, the the desire that you have is to bring this to an entire city, you know, an entire city that really needs this work. And I think it just speaks to who you are, that um, that you can be that person, you can be this model of service and generosity and care for the world. So thank you truly um, for me, like allowing the powerful tool of commitment to be a gateway to being this person out in the world. Um, yeah, and thank you for being in this experience with me. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the time that we had together.
Me too. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. Yes. Thank you.
Hmm. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Again, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you want information on that we shared in this experience, please feel free to let us know. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.